Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. Today's video is about port velocities, and I should say a small portion of it's about port velocities. I can't go into any great depth. I just don't have enough time in this one to do an in-depth video. Most of my in-depth videos, by the way, are usually on Sundays. So maybe at some point I will, it could even be this Sunday, where I'll do a greater in-depth about port velocities in an actual video, which will be on Sunday. This one on Wednesdays is usually product showcases, which is what this one is. And this one is my Brodix Dragon Slayer 255 standard wing. And I'll go through all the details on what it means. And through this, I'm going to show about the velocities inside the port. And we'll go through some of the things with it, okay? Before I do though, I want to show you what's coming up, because it just give you kind of a preview of what different things that are happening in the shop that I'm kind of excited about. I just want to share with you guys. On Friday, I usually do something involved racing, and my race projects would be the S10 and the Camaro. This one's Friday's video. This is the Brodix Headhunter head for a small block Chevy. I finished porting one of them, and we'll get to talk about this. We'll talk more about velocities with that one. And also, the carburetor came in from it. Mark Whittier, and I hope I'm not saying his name wrong, redid the carburetor for it, and I can't wait to test it. The bad news is, you see how the S10 is still up, or GMC Sonoma, however you want to say it, because I sent the headers out to be coated, and Jet Hot says they won't be done until September 24th. It's almost a month away. So before I can make it to the track for any kind of progress, I gotta wait. That's the way things are. But anyway, let's get to the video. Okay, so what head is this? Well, if you got it and you looked at it, you would see there's my emblem on it and everything. But this is the Brodix Dragon Slayer head for a small block Chevy. Now, before you guys say, oh great, another small block Chevy video, I only put out videos of things that came in. So far, this is what I've got, a slew of these to get done. It doesn't mean I don't do other heads. It just, right now, in the way the order are of things, that small block Chevy seems to be the thing. Anyway, these are not what you would get when you order them for yourself. So if you called up Brodix or Summit or whatever and you ordered a set of Dragon Slayers, they will not be like this. I'll go ahead and tell you. I've done a lot of things that are different. So how are they different? Well, and by the way, while doing this video, I'll try to answer a bunch of the other comments that keep coming up in some of the other YouTube videos, and so you can get your answers answered this way. This head's different from the factory one, being that one, it's got a much larger intake valve. This is still standard valve spacing, which means it hasn't been altered at all. So most pistons will fit it, except for this one will probably have to be fly cut because the intake valve's so big. The intake valve size itself is a 214. That's 2.14. Because this is a standard valve spacing, in order to make that happen, I shrink down the exhaust. And the exhaust valve size is a 1.56. Yes, you heard that correct. And I know already someone's like, well, you just killed it. That's too small of an exhaust valve. There are heads right now that have a 1.580 exhaust valve and will make 1,000. This one's not going to make an 1,000, so it's fine. And by the way, this similar head with the 1.560 has made 780. So I've done several of these. So that's a pretty big change. It's got a 50-degree intake valve job and a 50-degree exhaust valve job, 64cc chambers. But here's some of the bigger differences. The pushrod slot has been moved. And by the way, they've changed castings. You wouldn't know this, but when I first started ordering these, if you order them without the pushrod slots machined, it would be flat straight across. Then they started casting them kind of like this, so it's a bit more tricky. But anyway, the pushrod slot is moved over, so this one does require shaft rockers. So there's a big thing. 64cc chambers, requires shaft rockers. I'm still using the 1206 intake gasket opening. This is not a 1207, 1206. This gives me the minimum cross-sectional area of 2.81. It's about as big as I can go with a 550 offset required for the shaft rockers. So you could tell what I mean. See how they're moved over? Because of this, it takes a 550 offset shaft rocker if you use a standard on-center lifter. If you don't, you have to use a 450 offset, and then you can run a 180 on the lifter and be fine. However, usually I just sell them with a 550 because you never know what they're going to do. Anyway, so it's 255 cc's, at least it was before that wing's there. The previous versions that I've done do not have this wing that you see in the center. which I'll have to have in another video to describe that. I promise I will, just not this one. So the port itself might be a tad smaller than that because the wing's in it. By the way, if you've watched any of my other videos, like how the porting process video, that was this head. So the one that I put out on Sunday, which was how to port an exhaust port, that was this head. This is what it looks like completed. Now, some of you are looking down in there right now and say, what is that? Because several people have asked me about, what about breaking through the head bolt hole here? Okay, that's a good question, right? When you grind, you make the bowls bigger, typically you're gonna break through. Well, when you break through, it usually leaves a hole that goes around to the other side. Now, it's not gonna go through water, but it can pull air from the sideways. Now, I've talked about this before, but I'll go through it real quickly. In my testing, having the sleeve in here, it makes more power than having it out, which I know seems counterintuitive because it does kind of block the flow. But even if you didn't have the sleeve in, your head bolt stud would still be protruding out almost that much. The sleeve's only 15 thousandths larger. So in other words, it's only 15 thousandths more than the stud, so it's not pointing out that much more, okay? Now, someone would also say, well, doesn't that weaken the deck? I'm glad you point that out. Here's how I install them, which I don't know if you could see it in there. Probably not. Let me grab a flashlight real quick. Look in there, you'll see that the sleeve does not go all the way down to the end of the deck. I usually have it, when I ream out the hole, I leave it in the deck about 700 thousandths or so. Usually I stick my pinky in, so it's probably more. From there, once I feel the bit hit it, then I stop, which is about there. So in other words, the deck surface, which is about this much, is still intact. That doesn't change. So it's actually sitting on a register right there. So on the top side, the sleeve gets machined down. There's still got some trash in it, still needs to clean it up. This is on the inside. But whenever it bolts down, it's pressing against that register itself. And by the way, remember, it's only taking out 15 thousandths, so it's not a ton that's been removed. I haven't had any issues yet with these not sealing, for the record. And I've done, not particularly just this one, but even my 242s have this. I've yet to have someone blow a head gasket because of this. I know, just for those that have been curious about it. Okay, so that's the head itself. Well, part of it. Let's get to the exhaust. For those that watched my video on exhaust porting, I'll show you that real quick. There's my exhaust. Okay, these are a D port, and they're a 1406 gasket, kind of, not at the bottom. Doesn't quite match. Forgot to mention too, I use a 5/16 intake stem and 11/32 exhaust stem. The reason for the bigger exhaust stem is because there's more pressure. And at one time I tried doing a smaller stem and it caused some issues. So usually I'll put the 5/16 on the intake and then 11/32 on the exhaust. So the valves end up being custom. These are not standard valves. You can't just order them straight up. You gotta have them ordered. These are custom for Reyes. Even though this is a 5/16 stem, because of the 215 head, it still weighs more than the exhaust valve that's 11/32. And this is the valve that was flowed with it and everything else, okay? Now, what I'm gonna go ahead and do right now is I'm gonna tie in the video of me flowing it, and we haven't mentioned velocities yet, but you're gonna watch me flow the head. I'm gonna flow the head, I'm gonna show you the velocity map, and I'm gonna show you the velocity through the pinch, okay? And then we'll come back. Okay, several of you have asked me to talk about the velocities inside the port itself, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you what that means and what everybody's talking about with that. This is called a pitot tube. It's a weird spelling, but this is what you use to measure the velocities inside of a port. And it's got these fine holes that you can see here, and then it's got a hole through the center. Essentially what you do with it, it's got hoses that are hooked up to measure the vacuum or the pressure, and you put it inside the port. You can put it at different spots, and we'll tell you the velocity at its specific spots inside the port. Now, I actually mapped this one out, and I'll show you in a minute what the flow is like on the short side with that wing in there. But I'm gonna show you exactly how this works, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna measure the velocity right there at the push rod pinch. Should be something like this, and I'll do it live. You should be able to see the velocity pull up where it says pitot. That's where the velocity will actually show up. Okay, I'll kick on the bench here in a second, and we'll see what happens. I'll be honest though, I rarely use it on these heads anymore, just because I've done so many of these. I know exactly if I make it this side was this size, this height, and this width, what's going to happen. So it's great for development, but once you've done enough, I don't know that you need to keep doing it unless you're trying to do something totally different. But anyway, let's go ahead and kick it on and see what, so I can show you what happens. Ear protection, maybe not. Here's how the old bench works. Because it's got the electronics, I have to turn it on over here. Okay, so you can see it was 320 at the pinch right there. But I did take measurements over the short side, and I want to show you that real quick. See if I can get this graph. There we go. This is a graph that shows you the pressures that are there of the port. And just so you can kind of see, this is the exact port that it is. But the red, of course, is the higher velocity, the dark red, and then it gets to less. So if you look at it from the flow standpoint, this kind of gives you an idea where to port, or maybe not where to port. It gives you ideas of where to go anyway. You can see the light blue up there is the slowest area, then it gets faster, faster, and of course at the short side it's the fastest. So you can see it's faster on this side of the port than it is this one. You see that little yellow spot right there in the center, that'd be where the wing is, and that'd be the highest velocity point. So, but if you look at the raw numbers, let me see if I can go back to that report. I'm trying to find this stuff real quick. I should have had it already ready. There we go. There we go. This is going to be a little confusing, but where's my pointer? There we go. You can see the 145. This is the top left, top center, top right, middle left, middle center, middle right. Now here's the short side. 349, 376, 364. So you can see right through there, okay? So that tells you what the bottom floor is, so they see the raw numbers. And through the pinch, it was 320. Now, why is this kind of important? If you wanna make a good port, I'm just gonna walk over here, my arm's getting tired. If you wanna make a really good port, what you really wanna do as far as velocity-wise is, you wanna try to keep the velocity the same or speed up as it goes to the valve. What you don't wanna have happen is where you have areas where there's huge swings in velocity in the port, where maybe this part's really fast, but this one's dead slow, because essentially you have a dead area. So you want a nice consistent velocity through the whole port that goes in. However, that's a perfect world, or I should say, not even that, but have it where it increases all the way to the valve. But that's a perfect world. With design characteristics of different heads, that's not always possible, especially with a small block Chevy. Because what you're doing is you're entering here, you gotta go up and then you gotta go down. If the port was raised up, things would be different. There's a lot of design stuff that makes it tougher to work with, that you do the best you can with what you got, but it's not gonna be exactly perfect. This one's pretty good, 320 through the pinch, and I typically try to target on the short side no faster than like 420, with really 400 being about where I wanted to be. And this one isn't too far off at 376. It's a little bit slower there, which is fine. I kind of prefer that, but I definitely don't want to go over 420. 420 I've seen work, but it limits your RPM potential because it typically means it's about to back up. 400, that's a good one, but you can also have the port where it backs up. And then if you get in the 350s, it's really slow there, which means you've gone maybe made it too big or done something a little bit too drastic. But anyway, hopefully that gives you some stuff. And these are just my opinions. You can do whatever you want. This is just what I do, and it seems like it works. This particular head itself has made, not this exact one, obviously, but the one without the wing. So I take the wing out, same measurements, everything else on the inside of the port besides this one has on a wing. That one has made 774 horsepower and a 397 cubic inch small block Chevy with a tunnel ram, a Holley Pro Dominator tunnel ram. So that was also quite a bit of compression and a fairly healthy cam. But for that small of an engine, I mean, that's really good power. 774 from this type of head, low port stuff, really good stuff. So this one is not going to be on, it probably will not make that just because this one's going on a pump gas 434, but it should do really well. great power. Hopefully I'll have dyno numbers much later on. Waiting on the intake manifold to come in for this one, which I've been waiting since April. It's the Edelbrock 2892 is the one to be matched to this. But anyway, I'll take it over to the bench and let you see it without it up on the flow bench, so you can see what the actual ports look like. And we'll talk more about the specifics of the head. All right, now that you've seen it flowed, we'll go ahead and go through some of the numbers that I have for it. This is from the Sanyas bench, which is the one you saw me just float on now. And the reason why is because my pitot tube is hooked up on the Sanyas bench, not on my Superflow. Although I floated on both, and I'll show you in a minute. The numbers I really care about, if you remember any of my other videos, is the 400 number, which is 256, really good. The 600 number, which is 325, which is outstanding. And my peak number of 342. Now, if you notice, it actually was at 343 at 800. It looks like it's backing up. Part of that is because of me. At 900, I end up putting the pitot tube in there, and I think I mess up the clay. Also, because it's warmer, it's really hard to keep the shop cool enough where the clay is not trying to move. But anyway, because I'll show you when it was a cooler day and I got it to flow in the morning, I floated on the Superflow. This is the exhaust flow. And if you listen to my video, it did pretty much what I said. The 400 number, 208, and the peak number is 250. That's outstanding for the size of valve. By the way, this is no exhaust pipe. Now, you're like, that's all? That's it? Yeah, here's the Superflow numbers. Because most people flow on a Superflow. I have both benches, so I can give you both numbers. That's what it did on a Superflow. It looks so much better on a Superflow. If you look now at 400, it's 265. Look, it goes over 300 at 5. At 6, it's 332. That's outstanding. And for those of what 700, 343, and the peak number of 353. Really strong number. And my Superflow, even though it's higher than my Sanyas, is still lower than many other Superflows. By the way, it's still matched it there. And for whatever reason, my Superflow reads lower on the exhaust than the Sanyas, but not by much. At 400, it's 200. And then at peak, it was 250. So really good numbers. Now, this is a kind of cool thing. Because I use Performance Trends, wherever this is, this program allows a whole bunch of different stuff to be interpolated or interpreted from this data, and I'll show you some of them. So this is one of the reports you can do. This one's kind of neat. Hopefully you guys get a kick out of this. Boom. All right, what this one is this is back from the Sanyas bench. So these are the Sanyas flow numbers right here. But this tells me that valve area in square inches as the valve lifts. You can tell you're maxed out at a certain point. This tells me the CFM per square inch. So for every inch, how much it's flowing. So you could see, like you could tell when you have a really good head because look, it's, yeah, at 5, it's not as good as you would think for the area that it has. But then you look at, well, see, this would be 8, 9, and 1. They're really good numbers there. This is your actual flow area, or flow coefficients are here. This is valve velocity. So this is not measured. This is calculated. This is what it calculates the valve velocity to be at each lift. So from the speed that it has, and it knows the area because I put it in the throat diameter, it could tell me the valve velocity calculated at the valve. It can also tell me, because I entered the CCs of the port, the length of the port, it can actually tell me the calculated port velocity. So this would be over the average over the port. Because you might say, how is this slower than that? This should be faster, but as you know, it's it doesn't happen that way very often because of design limitations. So this is my average port velocity, which isn't that bad. See, like 285. Not bad. Not bad at all for an average one. By the way, these are all the exhaust numbers, which I won't go through with you except for this one, because I got asked about this. This is your exhaust to intake ratio. Now, I know some people are firm believers in that thing right there. I think this is garbage. I know somebody's like, oh, no, then you don't know what you're talking about. Let me explain why. If you want to have a high intake, exhaust to intake ratio, all I have to do is make my intake flow worse. So if my intake, let's say I made it flow 10 CFM worse, this number will come up dramatically, and it's going to look pretty good. The catch is it will make less power because that engine needed this airflow. Let's assume that this is the right size for the engine, which it should be. And if I take 10 CFM out, Now it doesn't have the airflow that the engine needs for the RPM it's going to turn, but the intake to exhaust ratio looks good and it makes less power. That's why I think this right here is garbage. I know some people will go against me, and you feel free to comment. I will put an okay whenever you do, but that's how I feel about that. All right. Thanks for sticking around. I know it's probably a little bit longer video than you anticipated, but I try to get a little bit extra information. These heads are very nice. If you're interested in ordering a set, I'd say get in line. I could take your order, but it's going to take a while to get them. And for those wondering what's the next head you got to port, well, next week I have to finish, do research and develop on a set of Cadillac heads. After that, then it's going to a different Dragon Slayer head. You're like, oh, some more small blocks. It's just what I've got a slew of right now. But the next one will be it'll be, well, very different from this one. The next head that I will do that's Dragon Slayer will be a 40-60 spacing, so it's not standard anymore, but it is a standard push rod slot. So in other words, it's the best stud mount one you could have for a 40-60. Anyway, thanks for watching. You guys take care.